Vampire was, I really enjoyed it. It was a very enjoyable book, but I have a lot of thoughts and opinions that maybe aren't shared with many others because I've seen so far. So, yeah, I'll get into that. Okay, so like I read this book like a while ago, and Interview with a Vampire. Okay, so first off, I had seen the movie before I read the book. I didn't really know about there being a book or anything, so I really enjoyed the movie. I liked the casting and everything, and I thought it was very good. And after reading the book, I still enjoy it. It's like it's obviously different, and they changed some things and left some things out here and there, but it didn't like hinder it in any sort of way. At least to me, I still enjoy them both. But the book, well, let me start with Louie. Louie is a very interesting guy. Like he hates being a vampire, yet at the same time, sometimes he can act like a bit of a I don't want to say a bitch, but you know he has his bitchy moments, and it's just like, but he can be so hypocritical of Lestat as well, which I just don't get. Like when he made Claudia, like he made her a vampire because he couldn't resist his own bloodthirstiness. Yet he's so. Did he make her? Or was that Lestat? Oh my god. Well, he sucked the blood out of a 5-year-old girl, which is wild. Like 5 years old. Kirsten Dunst looked around like 12 or something in the movie, but in the book she's like 5, and that's just even weirder, especially with like the sexual undertones of it. That shit is just wild. Like, the whole Lolita thing is not the business. She's 5 years old. That shit is weird. Anyway, he did that to her, yet he's so judgmental of Lestat. And it's just like, Lestat is a monster. That's the thing I appreciate about Anne Rice's novels on vampires. You know, it's a different sort of romanticism, you know. You romanticize about being immortal and having all these powers and being so sexy and yada yada yada, but at the same time, there's no denying that these are monsters. These are bloodthirsty killers. These are monsters. These are not something that should be worshipped. Yet somehow it gets like lost in translation, like current vampire media nowadays. And you could say it's because of Twilight, but I don't know. Like the Vampire Diaries, the books came out in like the late 90s. Even though the vampires were still, you know, doing crazy stuff, it wasn't as obvious that they were monsters because they kept messing around with Elena. And even, I don't know, there was always this romanticism of it. You know, sexiness, yada yada, and all that stuff. And a little bit of romance here and there, but don't like romanticize being like dead and sucking people's blood and stuff. Like, that's not appealing. Like, it's not. It's interesting, you know, but it's not appealing. I don't find that attractive at all. I think I enjoy Louie, reading from Louie's point of view, even if I thought he was a hypocrite and a little bitchy at times. So it's gonna be weird switching to Lestat's point of view, because though Louie's like a hypocrite when it comes to Lestat and other vampires, Lestat is like one crazy mofo. He is like insane. He's done some really sick, twisted things, and I've heard some things about the vampire Lestat, like, and of course the movie where Lestat's kind of like, I don't know, like the anti-hero or something, and I heard something like Anne Rice had basically like retconned his character a bit to make him seem like the good guy in the situation and Louie the bad guy, and I just thought that was, you know, I just feel like if that's so, then that's kind of like a cop-out, because Lestat is a sick SOB, but at the same time, it doesn't make him even less of an interesting character. I'd still want to read from his point of view, you know? And if he did have some sort of redemption, I think that'd be even wilder. That would take like a lot more effort and have to be very clever, because if you can get redemption from him as he was in Interview with the Vampire, that'd be amazing. she just retconned it, and I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I'll read it later and see. But in Interview with the Vampire, the thing with media taking place in like the older times in America, you know, with the slaves and everything, they usually try to like gone with the wind this kind of shit, you know, like romanticize, like, oh, it wasn't that bad, you know, oh, there were some happy slaves. And you know, the slaves aren't like a real focus on here, but at the same time, it's not the slaves, but it's like Louie is getting like the Gone with the Wind treatment, where he's like, even if he like owns slaves, he's still like a good guy, which I like, no. I don't think that about anybody. Like, oh, but you know, it's expected of him, oh, it's the time, and it's just like, oh, he wasn't mean to them, like, they're still slaves, you know. So I know people see it as like a good guy turning and falling into despair and all that stuff, but he's never been a good guy to me. He's always like, him falling into that despair and giving into his vampire stuff is because he confuses himself to be a good person, you know, at times. Of course, I don't think he does that now, but in the beginning, he confuses himself to be a good person, that he was different from others. And he's just, I think the worst thing that he can discover is that he's just like everybody else. When he was a human, he was just like everybody else. When he's a vampire, he's just like any other vampire, you know? Like, you're not special, basically. You're not special. Nobody's special around here. But the whole relationship between Louie and Lestat, it does give off like gay undertones too, but I didn't, maybe it's just me, but I didn't see it as like that, like, big a deal. I mean, vampires are like a very sexual beings, and when they're not like trying to drink your blood or trying to get something their way, like, I don't think you can say like, oh, they're like sexually fluid or anything. It's just like, they're hungry. That's how I see it. Of course, you know, I think their whole sexuality really depends on the vampire and what the fuck they want, but I personally don't care about their sexuality. Whenever I saw like them being seductive to others with like the same gender or all that stuff, I just was like, yeah, you better get your snack. Like, that's how I saw it. People like accuse these books of being like super gay, and I just don't see it. But it was a bit stifling seeing Lestat lie to Louie about there not being any other vampires, that they're literally alone. When it was clearly, I don't know, Louie got on my nerves with that. He legit didn't even, he does this whole like inner monologue about him trying to find others like them and stuff, yet I don't know, like, he went to Europe and all that stuff, but it's just he was like so on Lestat's leash. Like, at the same time, he kept thinking that he was like better than him. It's like, Lestat's got you whipped. Like, clearly you guys aren't the only vampires. He's just like, oh, Lestat won't tell me who made him. It's just like, man, bump Lestat. Like, I just don't get it. And I don't get how they can like stay in New Orleans for such a long time. Like, I know they traveled a bit, but they're mostly like based in New Orleans, and later on they were like in Paris, but mostly it was like in New Orleans. I'm just like, y'all were like around for like a good amount of decades, like, hundreds of years. Like, people ain't been noticing anything. And like, yeah, people have noticed, but it's just like, it's just not safe. I don't know. Like, Lestat got on my nerves, but he was supposed to. But Louie getting on my nerves was just something else. He just thought too much. He thought too much, and it got to a point where you just get the vibe that he thinks he has like a big ego, in my opinion, where it's just like, he's like, oh, this existence is a curse and yada yada yada, yet you go and eat a child. So I just don't get it. Like, if you were so cursed by this existence, why not just stake yourself or something, like kill yourself? But he doesn't want to do that because he's like, oh, my inner selfishness. And it's just like, okay, bro, Well, then what are we gonna do? You gonna keep thinking about this for the next 100 years? Like, it really got on my nerves. And then when like Claudia was like introduced, that was weird. Like at first in the beginning it was interesting, to see their relationship, but like as the years went on and she like obviously aged inside but not outside, that shit was just wild. That made me so uncomfortable. She started thinking and having feelings like a woman, of course, because she's older. But at the same time, she's like, I don't know how to explain it. But yeah, there's this thing where she tries to get like, there's some sexual undertones with like either Louie or Lestat, and I can't remember. But it was just Louie, most definitely. And it's just so weird to me because she's like I know she's grown inside, but she's in the body of a 5-year-old. So it was just so uncomfortable reading those scenes. Oh my god. I don't know, people think that Louie was like a boring main character, but well, he was boring because he just sat there and watched stuff happen, which I was fine because we got to see what was going on with everybody else. But the fact that he was more of a watcher than like an action taker was kind of annoying, but at the same time I was interested. Let's get into Lestat, because Lestat, I did not like this guy. I don't like him. He's like such a sick demon. Like he's done some really, like, and I saw it from like the movie and stuff, but the movie was kinder on both of their characters in my opinion. Louie wasn't as boring or contemplative, and Lestat, oh my gosh, this guy does the most sick, like, I get you're a vampire, and you're a monster at that, which, it's expected, but oh my god, he would do the most sick stuff. I don't know, and I keep seeing like these fan fictions of Lestat, and I'm just like, why? Lestat, of all people, why? I don't know, I think it's mostly because of the movie, but I don't know, I can't see people being so attracted to these vampires. For me personally, I really like the lore of vampires, but they're not my favorite monsters. But I really do love the lore of them. But I don't find them like attractive whatsoever. So it was easier for me to have a more objective view on the characters as I was reading, especially towards the end where, oh my gosh, there's more vampires. Who would have thought? Like, oh my god. It was just like, it was supposed to be like this shocking moment, like, oh my god, there's actually vampires. I'm just like, I don't know, maybe it's because I've been like, I'm not reading this in the 70s or the 80s when this came out, the 70s. So, I've been hit over the head with so much vampire media and just, I don't know, just there being a world where they're like the only 3 vampires on Earth. I was like, I hope that's not it, because that wouldn't make any sense to me personally. I just couldn't see it. They're like in Paris and they find the other vampires and Louis finds his own contemplative maid, yata yata yata. I wish we had gone into, I forgot his name, but the guy, the leader of like the theater crew, I wish we had been able to spend more time in his head or see what was going on with him, because he just seemed so interesting to me. He was like so immersed in his like demonic existence, and I just found that just so interesting. And then like Claudia's death was, I'm gonna be honest, I watched the movie, but at the same time I for some reason wasn't prepared to read about her death. I don't know why. Her and her lady, whatever. But it hurt. It really hurt. It didn't hurt me in the movie for some reason, but reading it, I don't know, maybe because Claudia was like more, the characters were more expanded in the book, of course, because, it's a book, you can literally write whatever you want. But, I don't know, Claudia's death really hurt. But, it was literally the only escape, because she was just, not only are you damned to like be a blood-sucking fiend for like all of existence until you burn in hell, she was stuck as a child, as a 5-year-old at that. If she was 12, that'd be a bit better because, she'd have more dexterity and people wouldn't be looking at her funny if she went places on her own all the time. But she's like 5, stuck in a 5-year-old's body, and that is just wild. That just made me uncomfortable. And then like the sexual kind of undertones of her was just so weird. I just felt so bad for the little bitch. She was a little bitch because she did some really petty stuff but she at heart wasn't as twisted as Lestat, but she did start to favor Lestat after a while, which I could understand because Louie literally just sat back and did nothing. Like, if it wasn't for her taking action, they wouldn't have come across the other vampires, which sadly resulted in her own death. But like, he like went on this whole mission in the middle of fucking nowhere, and it's just like, what are you doing, dude? Why would the whole time I was watching it, reading it, it was interesting, but it kind of like reminded me of like a Ronin kind of story. If you know anything about Japanese manga or anime, even like Clannad, if you've seen that anime, it kind of reminded me of that, just roaming around. But he was looking for, of course, vampires in the middle of fucking nowhere, which I never, from what was happening within the lore of Anne Rice's vampires story, vampires are like pretty extravagant, so unless there was like a goddamn mansion somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, I was just like, why, Louie? Yeah, it was interesting going there, but Louie I could see why people would dislike him, but I was fine with him. I actually started to like him near the end because he killed everybody and he actually got a backbone. So I enjoyed that. Those are like my overall thoughts on Interview with a Vampire. It was a nice read too. It was a very nice read. The way the book is formatted, like her writings, unless you're like invested in it in like certain parts and stuff, it can be a sort of slow burn at times. It's one of those take your time. It's not a quick like book. You definitely have to take your time and get immersed in it, which I appreciate. But at the same time, there are times where it could like really drag on, and I'm just like, y'all are still in New Orleans. It's been how many years now? If I were to give it a score out of 10, a solid 8. I was thinking about giving it a 9 and stuff. I don't know, just Louie, as much as I liked his character, I don't know, it's just he got real boring at times, man. He just got really boring. He just turned into like a whole spectator, and I just felt like Louie wasn't even there anymore. I was there. But yeah, I'll give it an 8. I definitely like to reread it. I would recommend it to people who are into like the more horror aspects of like vampires. But if you're like into teeny bopper vampires and love triangles and stuff, I don't think you enjoy this. There's romantic elements, but it's not YA romance where everybody's kissing everybody. So those are my thoughts. I'm out.